we bring you another legal breaking reporting video analysis update. Oregon Governor and the Oregon Attorney General sue the Trump administration for not honoring their wishes and not sending the National Guard into Portland. Let's get to this reporting by KGW. Ladies and gentlemen, the article is titled Kotek Rayfield Sue Over Federal Troops in Portland. Ladies and gentlemen, this is by Tim Steele, Steele. And ladies and gentlemen, the article reads, continuing a unified front, Oregon Governor Tina Kotek, Attorney General Dan Rayfield, and Portland Mayor Keith Wilson held a joint press conference Sunday. That is today, ladies and gentlemen, to announce new litigation following President Trump's announcement that he would deploy federal troops to Portland. Rayfield said the request for a temporary restraining order, or ladies and gentlemen, otherwise known in legalese as TRO, was filed at 2 p.m. today, which is again Sunday. Slightly more than 4 hours after learning Trump invoked Title X, which allowed him to order the deployment of the Oregon National Guard to Portland. This, ladies and gentlemen, still violates the separation of powers and is in violation regardless of what anybody says, and is therefore illegal because the governor and state officials have said that the National Guard is not needed whatsoever. There is nothing going on in Portland whatsoever. Rayfield said the plaintiffs are the state of Oregon and the city of Portland in the request for a temporary restraining order, again otherwise known in legalese as TRO. Filed in the District Court of Oregon. Quote, we hope to be in front of a judge within a week, unquote, Rayfield said earlier Sunday. Today, Secretary of Defense sent a memo to Oregon Governor Kotek authorizing 200 members of the Oregon National Guard to perform federal functions for 60 days, including protecting federal property, where, quote, where protests are occurring or likely to occur, unquote. Again, ladies and gentlemen, there is no rebellion, nor are there any wars or any protests going on in Portland. It is dead silent. Oregon Governor Kotek said this was a sad day for Oregon, a sad day for the United States, unquote. The governor, who is the commander-in-chief of the Oregon National Guard, is no longer in charge of them since Trump illegally, might I add, ladies and gentlemen, my editorial's note, invoked Title 10. Quote, I will always authorize the use of the Oregon National Guard, unquote, Kotek said, adding, quote, regardless of who is directing their deployment, the Oregon National Guard is made up of our neighbors, citizen soldiers, unquote. Lieutenant Republican Oregon Governor Tina Kotek, Attorney General Dan Rayfield, Portland Mayor Keith Wheeler, during a press conference announced a lawsuit against the federal government over the illegal, again, ladies and gentlemen, my editorial note, of troops in Portland on September 28th, 2025. Today, ladies and gentlemen, pressed for details about what Trump is thinking, Kotek was direct. Quote, I don't know what he is thinking. We have zero details, unquote. The governor said, quote, this is un-American, unquote. Rayfield later added that he is proud to be associated with attorneys general from around the country in drawing, quote, a line in the sand, unquote, in these attacks on free speech and the rule of law. Kotek said again that she's been in touch with Oregon, ladies and gentlemen, with other governors across the country, including Illinois' Governor J.B. Pritzker and California's Governor Gavin Newsom, over this ongoing abuse of power. She also made the point Trump may be getting outdated information. Quote, we cannot be looking at footage from 2020, unquote, she said. Trump saying the federal courthouse is under attack in Portland, quote, is simply not true. Because it's not true, simply not true at all. Asked if there was any plans to go to Washington to meet with the president, Rayfield turned it around. He offered to drive the president around with the governor and the mayor to show how vibrant Portland is. Quote, we'll make a day of it, unquote. What the lawsuit states. In a statement released on Sunday, Rayfield said, quote, sending in 200 National Guard troops to guard a single building is not normal. Might I add, ladies and gentlemen, sending 200 National Guard troops illegally because it wasn't authorized by the governor and state officials, despite Title X. If you had a concern about safety at your own home, you'd make a few calls and fill the gaps, not call in an army. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, what we're seeing is about public safety. Is not about public safety. It's about the president flexing political muscle under the guise of law and order, chasing a media hit at the expense of our community, unquote. The lawsuit argues that the president lacks authority under Title 10 United States Code 12406, which permits federalization of the National Guard only in circumstances of invasion or rebellion, or when federal law enforcement federal laws cannot be enforced, nor executed. None of the circumstances exist in Oregon, which is true, or within the United States, anywhere in the United States. Therefore, this is not covered under immunity. The complaint further argues that the federalization is based on a baseless and hyperbolic pretext. Claims that Portland is burning or ungovernable are false and fictional. The order violates the Posse Comitatus Act, which prohibits the military from engaging in civilian law enforcement. The order infringes on the 10th Amendment, stripping the states of their constitutional power to manage law enforcement. Oregon officials, including the Portland Police Bureau, have repeatedly confirmed that they have the capacity to maintain public safety without federal troops. Next, and last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, the lawsuit seeks to give immediate relief from the court during the federalization of organs, National Guard, unlawful, and halting the president's order. Ladies and gentlemen, we are headed into Saturday's order. All of this came about after Trump's Truth Social post on Saturday. He was sending troops into Portland. During a press conference Saturday, Kotek said that she told Trump in no uncircumstances terms that there was no need for federal troops to be sent to Portland. Quote, I spoke. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a direct quote from Governor Kotek herself. I spoke with the president. I asked him not to send troops. I tried to understand his reasoning, and I told him we are taking care of it, unquote. Kotek said on Saturday, which is, again, yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, quote, I have full faith and confidence in local law enforcement and the folks here today. We do not need federal troops. And I said, we disagree. And he said, quote, well, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, let's keep talking, unquote. Kotek urged Portlanders to not take the bait, unquote, but added that she's coordinating with Rayfield on an official response to Trump's actions. The result of that was Sunday's announcement, which came today, ladies and gentlemen, of the action seeking a temporary restraining order.